Welcome, everyone. Good morning. It is great to see everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and start our program because we've got most of the people in from the waiting room. So my name is Rick Krause, and I'm one of the organizers of this event. And I'm going to introduce you to Danny Diaz, who is going to welcome us all to the event so we can get started.
Welcome, bienvenidos a todos. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. We want to begin this amazing Saturday. We want to actually talk a little bit about Arte. Arte, as you have seen on the pictures, we promote Latino art, culture, and education. We have a lot of events coming up during Hispanic Heritage Month. That includes two events which are the copycats, and I want you to visit our website at arte-inc.com, and you will see a lot of the examples for the copycat competition, as well as the performance competition. We're also doing a virtual exhibition in our website as well. So we encourage everybody to see it. Les recomendamos a todos que vean nuestra página web, arte-inc.com, para ver todos los programas que estamos ofreciendo a nuestra comunidad. We want to thank Exploring Science, Enrique and his team for his support, and they are doing their programs also during the fall, and we encourage you to get in touch with them. We also want to thank Dr. Giovanna Guerrero-Medina from Ciencia for her support and for the support of Ciencia in this event. Not to forget, we also want to thank David Greco, the director of Arte Inc., for his support and engagement in the Latino community. So our programs include after-school programs. We also have given a scholarship. This year we gave approximately $7,000 in scholarship, added to the $83,000 that we've given already in the past 16 years. But we continue to encourage you to please visit our website, because we do have the copycat, we have the cooking demonstration, we have the performance, we have the exhibition, and all the programs that we offer to the students in New Haven and Connecticut. With that said, I want to introduce back Rick, who will introduce our speaker. Thank you. Y bienvenidos a todos.
Thank you very much, Danny. It's an awesome introduction. And so, welcome. I'm Rick Krause, and I'm a sixth-year graduate student in the neuroscience program at Yale. And I'm a member of Open Labs. So Open Labs is a group of graduate students that want to share fun science activities and presentations with local families, because we want to inspire you all to be the next generation of scientists. Open Labs teamed up with SOCNAS, which is the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science, to put this event on with Arte Inc. So we are all so excited to be able to do this event with you today. So what are we going to be doing today? We have a very special guest speaker that is going to talk to us about science and her pathway to science as a Latina. We also have two awesome science experiments that you'll get to do in breakout rooms with volunteers. I'm sure you're all as excited as we are for this event. So without any more delay, let me introduce our speaker. Dr. Giovanna Guerrero-Medina is Executive Director of Ciencia Puerto Rico, an international network of scientists, students, and educators committed to promoting scientific outreach, education, and careers among the Latinx community. She is also Director of the Yale Ciencia Initiative at Yale University, where she studies the impact of scientific networks like Ciencia Puerto Rico in improving access and participation in science. And she works to promote diversity through Yale's Provost Office. She has a PhD in molecular and cell biology from the University of California, Berkeley, and a bachelor's in biology from the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. With that, please take it away, Dr. Guerrero-Medina.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me? Yeah? Use the chat, because I'm going to be asking you a few questions, and I want to make sure that you're listening to me. Awesome. All right. Well, hola a todos. Bienvenidos. As Rick said, my name is Giovanna Guerrero-Medina, and I'm a scientist by training, but I'm also an educator and a leader. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit in Puerto Rico that promotes science education and careers. So who here is from Puerto Rico? Put it in the chat so that I can see. Where are my Boricuas at, okay? I want to see that. All right, as an educator and as a nonprofit leader, part of my job is to get young people like you interested in science. So today you guys are going to try your hand at science in a little. I know you guys want to open those bags, but wait, you're going to have to wait a little bit more. And I want to start out by telling you a little bit about what scientists like me and some of the other scientists that you'll meet today, what we do. All right. So, oh, awesome. Can I hear a wepa? Yeah, I see some people from Puerto Rico. Let me share my screen. Okay. And I'm going to open my chat. Can you guys see that big white circle? Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So imagine that this circle is everything that we know in the world today. Okay, this is all the knowledge in the world. It's all contained in this big white circle, right? And everything beyond that, all that black thing, is all the unknown. All right, when you go to grade school, and some of you are in grade school right now, you learn a little bit, right? You gain some knowledge. Then you go to high school and you learn some more. And so your circle gets bigger. And then you go to college and you learn a lot more things about many different disciplines, but you also start to specialize a little bit. Perhaps, just like me, you study biology, or maybe you study engineering, like I saw some of you being interested in the chat. And that's when things start getting a little bit interesting. Because after you get your degree from college, if you're a scientist, if you have a thirst for knowledge, if you have questions that you need to find the answer, that you must find the answer for, then you decide to become a scientist. And what you do is you keep studying and learning, and soon you will find that you will come to the edge of what is known. You'll come to the limit. All of a sudden, there is no one anymore that can give you the answers. There's no book you can go to find the answer for the questions that you have, because you're asking questions that no one has asked before. So instead of finding the answers in books, as a scientist, what you do is that you start to try things out, right? You come up with a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is basically a fancy word for saying basically what you think the answer will be. But you're not content with just thinking that you know what the answer is. You need to know for sure. And how you know for sure is you do experiments. You test that hypothesis. You try to figure out if what you thought was right is actually right. And so you start testing and testing, and you start pushing and pushing at that boundary of what is known. And then one day, yay, you make a discovery. You find the answer to the question. Perhaps you're the first one to find a new galaxy, or perhaps you're the first one to understand that a particular protein, what it does, or that's involved in cancer, or maybe you find a new way to make electricity out of plant waste. I mean, it could be anything. But whatever it is, the point is that you are the first person to hold a new piece of knowledge. And that knowledge, now you can share it with the whole wide world. And you've now pushed the limits of what was known in the world. You did that as a scientist. And that's the coolest thing of all, you guys, that you did that. And there are hundreds of thousands of scientists all over the world in all different disciplines and fields of work that are also pushing at the boundary of knowledge, and all working together. All of a sudden, we're making the world a little bit smarter. So that's what scientists do. We make the world a little bit smarter. So what kind of scientist am I? All right. Okay. What the science that I did had to do with this guy right here. I'm sure you all know what it is, right? It's a brain. And who knows what a brain does? Like, type in the chat to tell me what the brain does. It's one dry brain. Yeah, it's been preserved. Tell me what you think. The brain controls all the functions of the body. It tells the body what to do. It helps you remember. It commands a lot. It helps your memory. It thinks. It regulates the body. helps you function, yes. Yes, gives you ideas, gets you smarter, all of those things. The brain also controls how you feel about something. If you're afraid, if you're happy, if you're feeling loving. So all of those amazing things that make us human, that's what the brain does. And that's why when I was young, I became fascinated by the brain. We have this amazing organ in our heads that allows us to do all these things, and very, very complex things. And that's why I really became interested in studying the brain. Now, the reason why the brain is so complex is that it's made up of many, many, many nerve cells. Who knows how many nerve cells the brain has? Type it in the chat. Okay, I see 100,000. I see 90 million. I see billions. Okay, that's a huge number. I couldn't tell how many zeros that was. Okay, yeah, the point is that there's many cells. Actually, scientists estimate that in a human brain, there are 100 billion nerve cells. Okay, that's the number of stars in the Milky Way. Okay, it's a huge number. But it even gets more complex than that because all of those nerve cells are connected to many other different nerve cells in many different ways. And those connections are very important because that's how information gets passed from one part of the body to another. For example, from your eye to the top of your brain, so that you can figure out what you're looking at, and that you can figure out how it makes you feel, and then you can form memories. So all of those actions are formed at these connections. Okay, they form circuits, and if you count the number of those connections, that number is actually even more impossible to imagine. It's actually, the number of connections in the brain is actually more than the number of stars in the universe. And that's why, for me, the brain is the coolest thing ever, okay? So what did I do as a scientist? As a scientist, I was really interested in how nerve cells know when and where to form connections, and how those connections changed as we grow. Obviously, a human brain, as I told you, has 100 billion nerve cells, trillions of synapses, or these connections between nerve cells. So it's a little bit difficult to study how these connections get formed in humans. Plus, it's a little bit more problematic to do experiments in humans. So what I did is that I worked in a more easy to work with organism, the fruit fly. So you probably have seen the fruit fly in your house, particularly if you leave bananas out on the kitchen table. You'll see these little flies buzzing around. They don't bite. They're pretty nice. But they're really great organisms because we know all the genes that make them up, and we can control them. We can put in new genes, we can take genes out. And so what I did is I took a protein that produces bioluminescence. It's called green fluorescent protein, and you see the beautiful fluorescence that it creates there. And I modified it and I engineered it so that I would travel to the end of nerve cells like you see here. And the cooler thing is that I made it to be responsive to nerve cell activity. So whenever a nerve cell fired, whenever a neuron fired, my protein would change colors, and I could tell that the nerve cell fired. That's how I could tell that things were happening. And I expressed it, so I put it in the fly. I created a new organism, pretty much. Isn't that cool? And then I looked at the connections of the neurons when they made connections with the muscle. And so here you see a larva of the fruit fly, and it's expressing this protein that I modified, and you're seeing it as a green. And you're seeing here the points where the nerve cell makes a connection with the muscle. And I wanted to know how these connections formed over time as the larva grew, and that's what larva basically does. Their whole point in existence is to start growing and growing and getting bigger and bigger and fatter so that they can eventually give rise to a fruit fly. And so I wanted to know how those connections grew as the larva got bigger, and how the function of the nerve cells changed as the larva got bigger. Okay, so I discovered that new connections are added. Whoops, sorry. I discovered that new connections are added at the ends of the muscle rather than in the middle, and that these new connections are bigger, are stronger, sorry. So what I found out, and this is something that nobody else knew, was that there was a lot of difference between all these connections that the nerve cell made to the muscle. They weren't all the same. They weren't all equal. That wasn't known. There was a lot of difference in how strong that connection was, how much it fired. And I also saw that as the connections got bigger, as new of these connections were added, they, first of all, they were added at the ends. They weren't added all over the place. They kept adding at the end. And those new connections at the end, like you see here in the red, they were stronger. And so that was something that nobody else knew before me. All right. Okay, so let me switch gears a little bit. So that's what I did as a scientist. But I told you that I'm also an educator and an executive for a nonprofit that promotes science. And I switched careers after a point. After making all those discoveries, I decided that I wanted to switch fields and become an educator and an executive. And the reason I did that is that I found that many of the people that I talked to in Puerto Rico didn't know what science was or had never met a scientist. And that's a shame because we are all born scientists. And I stole this picture from a friend of mine, Daniel Colin Ramos. I think we might have some of the babies that are pictured in this photo in our audience. But I love this photo because it really shows what I'm talking about. We're all born scientists. You know, our brain is designed to be curious. It's in our DNA. No matter where you are from or what your background is, you want to explore the world around you. But many of us lose that because when they teach you science in school, perhaps they don't show you what science is all about. They don't do the amazing experiments that you're going to get to do today. And also, importantly, they don't show you what the people that do science look like. They don't show you that they look like you. They don't show you that they look like all these amazing young people. And in particular, when you're a Latina, they don't really show you many Latina scientists. And so I wanted to change that through my nonprofit. And over the years, I've met and trained hundreds of, probably thousands of scientists from Puerto Rico, from other backgrounds, Latinos, Black, white, all colors. And they're doing amazing things. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring these stories to people, particularly people in Puerto Rico who didn't really have these stories available to them, and make it more accessible. Show people that, you know, we look just like any other person. We come from all different backgrounds. And the one thing that ties us all together is that we're all curious and we all love exploring. And so that's what I do with my nonprofit. And you're welcome to visit it, particularly those of you from Latino backgrounds will find a lot, thousands, like over 10,000 Latino scientists. And you'll find resources that talk about science from our cultural background. You know, you'll find out why some of the things we do, even some of our traditions are rooted in science. And for those of you that are Spanish speakers, aquellos de ustedes que hablan español, en este website hay mucha información en español. So a lot of information in Spanish and amazing resources like we have here on the right, where we have a whole collection of Latina scientists. So now I get to give the world what I didn't have. A whole hundreds of Latina scientists talking about all the amazing things that are doing in engineering, in astronomy, in neurobiology, in public health, in evolution, in ecology, you name it. So that's it for me. I just wanted this to be a very brief introduction to the world that you're going to be exploring now. But I'm happy to take questions and answer anything related to what I did as a scientist or related to what I do now as an educator.
That's
So
awesome. Let's give
yeah,
a round of applause, at least virtually, for Dr. Giovanna Guerrero-Medina. And I want to make a quick announcement. If you haven't changed your Zoom name to match what you registered as, please do that now. That's going to help us with assigning breakout rooms. And I want to introduce Karthika Selvaganasan, who is one of our volunteers, who's going to ask some of your questions that you posed. So, Karthika.
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Giovanna. Thank you so much for that talk. That was amazing. So we had a couple of questions, and maybe I can, as I'm asking the questions that we have, if we could open up the chat if people want to put more in there just for this moment. So one of the questions we had was about your research, and someone asked, can we make pets fluorescent so that they're easier to find?
that's an awesome idea. And the answer is yes. Maybe not all pets yet. In theory, you could. People have made fluorescent mice, for example. Somebody's editing my slides, I see. People have made fluorescent bunnies. So any organism where we have the tools to change their genetic makeup, you can do things like this. And now there's many tools. Obviously, we have to be ethical in when we start, working with animals, or we start changing things in the genome. You don't want to make harm. You don't want to introduce new organisms that might be bad for the environment, or might change some of the dynamics between organisms. But yeah, when I was a grad student, my friends and I would, joke that we would create a company where we would create fluorescent plants for, decorating your house. So it's definitely something that would be possible.
Along that vein, before I ask the next question, I want to remind everyone, please don't put any personal information in the chat. Just make sure you put your questions in there. This is for your own personal security. So along the vein of the pets fluorescing, can we make cancer cells glow? So I'm thinking maybe outside the body or in the body.
Yes, and scientists have been doing that for many, many years now. I think this technology has been around probably for 20, maybe over maybe 30 years. And that's definitely one of the things that we do. These fluorescent proteins are very useful for knowing what's happening at the cell level, and even within the cell. So people have been attaching this fluorescent protein to other proteins to see how the proteins move around in the cell, or how they function in the cell. And yes, cancer biologists use fluorescent proteins all the time to figure out, for example, what a protein does, or how it's involved in cancer. So definitely.
Awesome. So I guess kind of just another question related to science. Is there a way to trap cancerous cells so that they stop from spreading? So I think this is a little less about the fluorescent proteins and more to do with cancer.
Well, I'm not a cancer biologist, but yeah, and actually some people use fluorescence to trap cancer cells. So you can, there's technologies where you attach a fluorescent probe, or, it could be a protein, it could be a molecule, to a particular cancer cell that has a specific, that's different from other cells for some reason. And there's tools that allow you to separate cells based on that color. So you can do that. And there's a lot of other ways that you can go about it. That's the cool thing about science. Once you know the fundamentals, and once you know how things work, then you can start thinking about how you can create new tools or new technologies to help you come up with solutions, or to figure out new questions. And so, for example, with cancer cells, we know that some of them express different proteins than normal cells on their surfaces. And so another thing you can do is you can come up with technologies that allow you to pull down those cancer cells by fishing for those proteins in the surface that are different from the proteins that are in normal cells. So that's another example.
Okay, so I think we're a little low on time, but I wanted to ask one question about who inspired you to pursue science, and if you had any like influential mentors or teachers.
I had way too many to name all of them. But I think one of the first things that got me really hooked into science was I was able to take a class, a biology class in college while I was still in high school. And I was around all these college students that were majoring in biology, and actually listening to them talk about why they were interested in science. You know, these were people that were close to my age, and it really got me excited. I could find an affinity to them. And so that's why one of the reasons why I thought, hey, you know, biology seems like a good major. I really enjoy having conversations about this with these people, and they seem really excited about studying this in college. So maybe I'll study this. And then as I continued my studies, I found a lot of scientists that, you know, I think they were just passionate about what they were doing, and they really were able to convey that excitement and that passion for me. Professors, other graduate students. I had one professor that, for example, was a neurobiologist, and he was an amazing teacher. And he also had a lot of art in his house. And as you can see, I like art too. And so I thought, you know, I can see myself reflected now. Science is not just about being, you know, like, oh, I like science, I'm a robot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can have other interests and other things, and we can find connections between different disciplines. And so that was one person in particular that really inspired me, in particular, to go into neurobiology, because he was a neuroscientist.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Giovanna. I'm going to hand it over to Rick, but if we could all give her another virtual round of applause.
Gracias.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. We love learning about not only your science that you did, but also how you make a difference in the world. Now we're going to move on to the hands-on part of the event. So you're going to go into breakout rooms with 2 volunteers, and they're going to quickly introduce themselves and get to know you. They'll give you some information about the science behind the experiment, and then they'll walk you through the experiment too. And we want to encourage you to turn your videos on so we can see how you're doing with the experiments and give you some tips along the way. And now, please make sure to pay attention to the instructions and follow exactly what they say. So please ask questions, though, if something doesn't make sense, because scientists are asking questions all the time. My colleagues actually get annoyed with me because I ask so many questions. So please feel free to do that. And with great experiments comes great responsibility. So please listen up to stay safe and have fun. And we'll do this demonstration for about 30 minutes, and we'll come back to the big group to share with everyone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon, and I'm a graduate student in neuroscience.
And my name's Nick, and I'm a graduate student in applied physics.
And today we're going to be walking you through our demo for the Family Science Workshop that Exploring Science and Arte Inc. held this past weekend. So the demo we're going to be talking about is our magnet demo. So before we get started with the experiments and the demonstration, we wanted to go over a little bit about what we already know about magnets. So some of you may have heard about magnets before. So if you can take a few moments to think about what magnets you've seen before, maybe what magnets you might even already have in your home. We're going to talk about magnets that we already know and kind of see maybe on a semi-regular basis. So the magnets that I thought about were fridge magnets. So you can get magnets sometimes from like zoos or amusement parks, or maybe if you travel somewhere really special, you can get a magnet to remember that place. And these are magnets that just stick to any metal all the time. So unfortunately, this isn't my magnet collection, but it's pretty cool. So they just stick to the fridge and they're always magnetic. Nick, you thought about a different magnet. Which magnet did you think of?
Yeah, so the magnet I thought about was one that's actually really cool. It's used for magnetic resonance imaging or for medical imaging. If you have a family member, maybe they've been inside one of these machines, the big white circle you see is actually full of giant magnets, and they allow you to take pictures of the inside of someone's brain, for instance, and all parts of their body. So it's a very cool tool for doctors to help diagnose things.
Yes, those are pretty big. They're like the size of a person. But we also thought of a magnet that's even bigger than that. This is bigger than a person, it's bigger than a hospital, it's even bigger than New Haven. And that is the Earth. So the Earth actually is a magnet, which means it has magnetic field going around it. And that's what makes our North and South Pole, those actually refer to like the plus and minus end of a magnet. So why is the Earth a magnet? Well, the Earth is a magnet because in the center of the Earth, it's really hot and there's high pressure, and that actually makes iron, which is typically a really hard metal. Maybe you've seen it in like trains, sometimes in cars, and it's really tough. But when it gets hot and high pressure, then it becomes a liquid, which is what this molten lava is, meaning it's a liquid that kind of can flow around, just like water can. But in the center of the Earth, this really hot metal is actually flowing in a circle around in the Earth. And that flowing molten iron lava is what makes the Earth a magnetic field. And so we thought we'd talk about why this is so useful and kind of some of the things that we can do with it. So Nick, what example did you find?
Yeah, so that's pretty cool because it actually can help us navigate. So say you're walking around, you get lost in the woods and you don't know what direction to go. Well, you can pull out your handy dandy compass, which we gave you one in your kits, which looks something like this. And that compass actually has iron inside of it. And that iron can sense the magnetic field produced by the Earth. And that way it will align itself, the little needle, with which way points north. So if you get lost, you always know which direction points north, and you can find your way, hopefully, from there.
Awesome. So now that we know what a compass is, and we know that it's using the fact that the Earth is a magnet and it has magnetic fields, we wanted to test an experiment of what would happen if we put a magnet that we have actually in our kits next to this compass. So if you can take out your magnet, which looks like this, so it's a small, bright silver thing. And we want to remind everyone to be careful when using these magnets because these magnets are, even though they're really small, they're really, really strong magnets. So if you put it next to something like your fridge, this can actually pinch your fingers. And I got pinched and it's not very comfortable. So we don't want to do that. And we also don't want to put them too close to electrical equipment for very long. So if you rub magnets over like computers and things, you can actually ruin your computer hard drive. So, if you drop it, that's fine. If you hold it, I'm holding it close to my computer here, that's fine. But you just don't want to like leave it for a prolonged period of time on any electrical equipment or kind of rub it over the electrical equipment. So just be careful when using these magnets. So what we want to do for our first experiment is use your compass and your magnet and see what happens. See if you can adjust or you can change anything about your compass with your magnet and maybe make some predictions of what you think would happen if you were to do that. And if you have any other compasses at home, you might want to give this a try with another compass. All right, Nick, you want to give it a try? See what you find?
Yeah, so let's see what happens here. I wonder if we can change which direction north is. And it seems like I can get a little bit here. So I'm noticing that I can sort of slightly move the needle. This compass, as Shannon said, doesn't have a lot of iron in it, so it doesn't work. But maybe we could ask, why can this magnet move the compass and overcome the Earth? It's not actually changing which direction north is, right? So I think, what would you think, Shannon? Why would I be able to change which direction north is?
So is it because this magnet, as we said, is really strong? So when it's really close to the compass, it's actually really strong and is adjusting the magnet and the magnetic field that our compass is using?
Yeah, that's right. So we have this magnet is really strong and it's actually very close to the magnet. And so the field that comes out of it is stronger than the Earth's field because we're very, very far away from the center of the Earth. where that field is being created from that molten iron that Shannon talked
Awesome. So what have we learned so far? So far, we've learned that flowing molten iron inside the earth makes a magnetic field. Also magnets, like the ones that we gave you in your kit and the ones that you find on fridges, also make magnetic fields. And that the iron or metal inside a compass can read or detect those magnetic fields. Awesome. So next, we're going to try and build something with our magnet. So we're going to build something called a motor. So Nick, could you first tell us what a motor is?
All right, so a motor, which some of you might be familiar with, for instance, some people mentioned car motors or motors for motorcycles, for instance, they take some kind of energy and transform it into motion. So in the case of the car, you feed it with gasoline, and the little explosions inside the engine from the gasoline make your car move and translate it into motion. Here today, we're actually going to use electrical energy, actually like a car with a battery, but now a battery which we've given you in your kit, which looks like this, in order to make a motor. And specifically, we're going to make a wire, a copper wire that we have here, which was taped on top of your cornstarch. We're going to make this wire move using the electrical energy in the battery.
Yeah, so as depicted here, we're going to have the wire sitting on top of our magnet. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a sec so we can get a better idea of exactly what we're talking about, and we can see everything really up close. So this is what your battery looks like in your bag. So it has a plus and a minus end, and everyone should have one of these, and then everyone should have a copper wire that looks like this. And so when you touch both ends of your wire to both ends of the battery, so I have one end touching here. If I were to connect this other end of the wire to the top of the battery, that will make what's called a closed circuit. And this is kind of like when you flip a switch on to turn on your lights. That would be like this wire touching the top of this magnet. And so we maybe know what happens when we leave our light bulbs on for a while. They get really hot. And so the same thing will happen here. So if you touch this end here, so right now it's not hot at all. I can hold this forever and it's fine. But if I touch them, it'll get hot. So we just want everyone to be really careful that when they're building their motors, don't leave the two ends touching for very long. If they touch for a little bit, that's okay. This is still pretty safe, but we just want to make sure that you're aware, and you'll feel when it's getting hot. Once we make our motors and our wires actually spinning, it won't get so hot. So just be careful in your design process that you don't have the bottom of the magnet and the top of the magnet connected by this copper wire for too long. Awesome. So then, as we had shown in our slide, we have our our battery, and then we have our magnet, and then we have our copper wire. So these are all the components that we're going to use. And Nick, you want to give us a demonstration of kind of what might be the best way to start putting this together?
All right, so what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to make the two magnetic fields fight together. And that fighting will hopefully be able to rotate and move our copper wire. Okay, so one source of magnetic field is the magnet, which we've already shown can move our compass needle around. But the other source is actually going to be the electricity. So as Shannon said, if we were to touch the copper wire to both ends of the battery, we would have electricity flowing through our wire. And it turns out that that electricity also creates a magnetic field. So we're going to have a fight between the electricity, the magnetic field from the electricity in the wire, and the magnet. And the way that we're going to do that is attach our magnet to the bottom of our battery like this. And then we're going to ask you to come up with a way of attaching the wire between the top end of the battery and the bottom magnet. And if you do so, and it's nicely balanced, the wire should spin around the battery, which I can't do very well with my hands, but hopefully we can ask you to get it to work.
Yeah, so you all can take a few minutes. You can pause this video if you want and give it a try. We're going to show you an example that worked pretty well for us. And just as a reminder, this is actually pretty tricky, and it took us a really long time to get a motor that worked well. So if it takes you a while, definitely don't feel bad. It takes us all a long time. And if you do get something working that lasts and spins for a really long time, like that's really awesome and pretty difficult. All right, so one way that works for us is to take this copper wire and kind of spin it around your battery. So if your wire is on the outside of your battery, it's not going to get that hot. So you can leave it on the side of your battery for as long as you want. That's all right, as long as it's not touching the two ends. So you spin it around here, and then you can pull it off of your battery like this, and you end up with a spiral of copper wire that looks like this. And now you can kind of unspool it just a little bit to make it a little bit bigger. And then what you can do is take this and put the top kind of like a bit of a hook so that it's flat, if you can see that. So that'll balance on the top of our wire, or on the top of our battery. And then we try and make it long enough, but keep it so it goes around the battery. So then this will be able to balance on here on the top. So it's not touching right now. So again, it's not hot while I'm doing this. So you can have it balance, and then you'll want to pull this down so that it'll be able to touch our battery. Cool. So now we'll see if we can get this going. And Nick's going to make one for himself as well. And once we get one working, we'll show you that. Nice. All right, so we've got one that's spinning. So there you go. You've got a spiral of copper wire on top of our battery. We kind of need to give ours a little push in the right direction. But then once it gets going, it'll start to spin, as we saw at the beginning there.
Oh no, I had it working.
Yeah, so it is pretty tricky, and it takes a lot of balance to get it working right. All right, so now I've got one going, so you can see that it's spinning pretty quickly, but once it stops touching either the top or the bottom, then it doesn't spin anymore. So we got to make sure that it stays balanced. Nice. Oh man, so Nick's got one that's going way faster than mine. So you can all give this a try and see what designs you can make. It doesn't have to be this design. There are lots of other designs that people have made too. So you can see if you can make one. We had some that were more like heart shapes around the battery. Those were pretty cool. And you can give it a try and see what design works best for you. Maybe have a competition with some of your friends to see who can get theirs to spin for the longest. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope you had a great time and enjoy learning even more about the great things that magnets can do. Thanks for joining.
This is going to be a guide to escaping a sticky situation. I have a friend, her name is Ella, and she's so silly sometimes. I mean, honestly, I do the same things, but hopefully, sorry for that. Yeah. All right. So back to Ella. You know, this could even be Ella. She is just such a jokester. So let me tell you about her situation. So she's an ecologist, which means she's a scientist that studies, she's a scientist that studies how organisms, which are like animals and plants and insects, how they kind of interact with their physical surrounding, right? So they want to see how, you know, for example, like a fly, you know, might get certain foods, or where does birds live, or these kinds of things. So Ella's a very interesting person. And so, you know, one day she was walking around the Great Meadows Marsh, which is located right here in Connecticut, and she wanted to gather information for her new book. Okay, she's very smart and she's a really great writer. And, you know, when you're a scientist and you want to, you know, write about what you're passionate, you have to do some research. So she's out here in the field doing some good research and looking at trees and looking at the insects and, you know, watching their behavior and trying to, you know, take notes. And something happens. She's so taken up with having just perfect notes and not missing anything. She doesn't see this quicksand right in front of her. Okay. And you won't believe what happens next. she falls into the quicksand. Okay. So normally it would be fine because it takes a long time to sink. But she's kind of frantic, she's worrying, and she sees a not so friendly snake nearby. Okay. So you guys have a mission. Okay. We need to learn how to get her out safely. We don't want her to sink. Okay. And we need to get her out in time before this scary-ish, he maybe he's not that scary. Maybe he wants to be your friend, but maybe we don't want to wait to find out yet in this situation. So we're going to be able to use some science and learn how Ella escapes. So are you guys up for the challenge? Yeah, I'm seeing some head nodding. So, all right.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rick. I'm a sixth year in the neuroscience department.
Hi, I'm Tabby, and I am a first year at the Yale School for the Environment.
We are super excited to talk to you today about our second demo for this event, which is OOBLECK. We're going to teach you all how to make it, but we're going to explain a little bit about the science behind it and also make sure that we're doing our best to understand the science to save Ella from the quicksand. Let's do a little bit of, let's share our screen so you can see exactly what's going on. All right, so Farah talked to us about Ella and her situation. And so we really want to be able to save her from that snake who may or may not be very nice. And to do so, we kind of need to understand exactly what's going on with quicksand so we can think about how best to save her. So let's go to some of the basics. Can you describe the three states of matter? Have you ever heard of those before? Let's think about it for a bit. All right, now that you've meditated upon it, let's see if Tabby can tell us the three states of matter.
Okay, so solid, is that right?
That's correct.
Liquid?
Yes.
And gas?
No. Yes. Awesome. So solid, liquid, and gas are the three you may have heard of before, and they have different characteristics that can help us think about what it means to be one of these three categories. So solids have a definite shape, definite volume, and the particles that make them up are really close together. Liquids don't really have a specific shape. Liquids, much like cats, if you put them in a container, they will fill that container, but they do have a definite volume. And the particle is able to slide past each other. And that's sort of what makes it it's what we think about when we think about liquids. Stuff's just sort of flowing. And gases are undefined in almost all of these situations. There's no shape, there's no specific volume, and particles are very far apart. Okay, but this is the three sort of generic standard states of matter. But do you think that it's possible to occupy this like two different states of matter at the same time? Or in other words, can they occupy more than one of these categories at the same time? What do you think, Tabby?
Sure, why not?
That's right, I agree. Cats are a good example. They fill containers much like fluids. But one of the things that we often categorize this as are non-Newtonian fluids. So this just means that fluids that don't behave how we expect them to. And quicksand is actually a non-Newtonian fluid. And one way we can think about how to measure this is looking at viscosity, or basically how solid-like or liquid-like something is. So for instance, water is not very viscous. It flows like water, very liquid. But for instance, syrup, your corn syrup, maple syrup, any kind of syrup, is very viscous. It's approaching a solid, you might say. The cool thing about non-Newtonian fluids, though, is that it's able to change how viscous it is or how much it flows. Actually, it's a bit of a shapeshifter. It's very cool. And another example of non-Newtonian fluids is OOBLECK, and similarly to quicksand. And so whenever you dissolve something, let's say that we have some coffee, and we dissolve sugar in it, you just don't really see it. It seems like the sugar has magically disappeared and dissolved. But suspensions are a little different. It's where you don't quite dissolve things all the way, and some of those particles are still floating like little balls inside the liquid. And so that's what we mean when we say something is a suspension, or solids floating in liquids. And OOBLECK, which is what we're going to make today, has cornstarch floating in water. And so one quick question for you is, let's think about that example. So what is the solid and liquid in the quicksand suspension? If we have cornstarch floating in water here, what do you think about quicksand?
Is it sand and water?
Yeah, you're right, exactly. This one is kind of easy because it's in the name. Awesome, great work. But we have one reminder for you really quickly, or one safety thing. Do not put the oobleck down the sink. We're about to make it in just a second, but if you put this concoction down your sink, it will clog your pipes, and your parents will be very mad at you and us. So let's say it all together. Do not pour oobleck down the sink. Exactly. We're going to say this again, so remember. Okay, so now Tabby is going to make the oobleck for us. And the idea here is that we want to actually have this, there's a specific recipe, and it needs to be 2 to 1, which means we have 2 parts cornstarch, 1 part water.
This is my first time.
We have this handy dandy container for you where you can make everything, make all of it and play with it here. And there's also a cup to help you measure exactly what you need. So this paper cup, go ahead and take that out. Try not to lose any of the cornstarch when you do it. And so there are 16 ounces of cornstarch in this container. And this cup is 4 ounces. If that's true, how many pours of this cup do you think we need in the water if we need half as much water as we need cornstarch? This is a tough one. So if we need 8 ounces total of water for the 16 ounces of cornstarch, and this is 4 ounces, we need 2 of these. So we're going to fill this up with water twice and pour it in there. But we'll pour the first one pretty quickly because we know that we're going to be able to, you're going to shake some of that cornstarch out. Looks like there's some left in there. Yeah, so get a little flick action in there, knock all the cornstarch out. So we're going to pour the water in here. And we can do this one quickly because we know we're going to need at least 1 cup.
Do it all the way up?
Do it all the way up as much as you can without getting it messy. So go ahead and dump that in there. Very nice. Okay, and for the next one, still fill it up all the way, but pour it in slowly. And we're gonna pour it in as we're mixing.
What do I mix it with?
You mix it with your finger.
Oh.
I can pour for you if you'd like to. You want to mix, or you want me to mix?
You can mix.
I'll mix. Okay. So this actually gets kind of tough. You're going to notice as you turn it, it's actually kind of hard. It's not just a pattern. So you're already getting sort of to that oobleck stage. And so I'm just going to mix a little bit first before we add this new water. And then now Tabby can add the rest of the water. But add a little bit, maybe like half of that. And then we'll mix it around a little bit. And you can tell it's still pretty powdery, so it's definitely going to need some more. And most likely we're going to use that whole cup. We just don't want to go overboard because you don't have any more corn. You add too much water, then you're messed up, but you can always add more water later if you need more. Try and put this down a little bit. Nice, look at that. Tabby's getting in on that mixing action.
Oh my gosh.
You couldn't resist.
It's actually really tough.
Yeah, it's really tough. So the trick here is to mix slowly.
Oh.
And we're going to explain around the science behind why it's like this. But if you, the more force you apply, the actually harder it's going to be. How are we doing on water? We can go ahead and put the rest of the water in because you can see there's still some cornstarch at the bottom. It isn't mixed around.
Can I put my whole hand in it?
Yeah, put your whole hand in it. Feel crazy.
It feels weird.
It does feel really weird.
Oh.
Also, it is possible that you go a little messy. So hopefully you have your lab coats on at this time. If not, if you do get some mess on your clothes, it's going to be okay because it's just going to dry into cornstarch. So it won't be the end of the world. It's getting pretty goopy.
Yeah.
You feel like you're mixing that pretty well?
I don't know. I can't get to the bottom.
Right? You get to the bottom?
No.
That's a good hand workout, right?
Yeah.
You never stiff hand day at the gym. All right, so while Tabby's finishing up mixing, I'm going to explain a little bit more of the science. And remember, do not put this down the sink, please. So what's going on here? Tabby's going to finish up the mixing while we explain some of the science. So what we see here is the suspension that we talked about. Cornstarch are these little cylinder-shaped things, the little pill-shaped green pieces. The water are the little yellow circles. And so one thing is, what happens whenever you slowly press the oobleck with one finger? Is it more like a solid or more like a liquid?
And I press it.
Yeah, if you like, just put your finger into it slowly.
It's like a liquid.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's happening there is that all the particles are able to move out of the way in time. And so it's acting like a liquid. But if you punch it or apply more force, is it more like a solid or a liquid? And before you do this, please make sure that it is fully dissolved, because if you punch it while it's not, you're just going to be punching water. So let's take a second to make sure it actually seems like you've got all the cornstarch dissolved in there. All right, so we took a break to make sure that we got it all mixed up perfectly, because some of it was hiding at the bottom. So please make sure you do that too. And now Tabby is going to punch the oobleck, but she doesn't have any malice in her heart. She just wants to test it scientifically.
Yeah, hold it up.
Yeah.
Get that.
Are you punch it pretty hard? Punch it like it's soda lunch money. Yeah, that's right. You can see that it doesn't splash out like a liquid would. It's actually really weird. Oh no.
I made a mess on the computer. Sorry.
It was my fault. Okay. And so what's going on here is that as Tabby was punching the oobleck, the water moved out of the way really quickly. But the cornstarch was left there. And so it was like she was punching a bag of cornstarch that wasn't dissolved in water. And this idea is called shear thickening, which means that more force makes it become more solid-like. And this is a really interesting phenomenon or scientific process. And you might not know this, but ketchup is actually a non-Newtonian fluid, but it works the opposite of oobleck. So the slower you apply force, it actually acts like a solid. And the more force you apply, it begins to act like a liquid. And so that's called shear thinning, which is it's actually a mystery. We don't know how it works. So if you want to be a ketchupologist, we can definitely use you in the scientific field, because I love ketchup and I'd love to know more about it. Okay. So now that you're an expert on non-Newtonian fluids, how should Ella escape? Do you think it's better to move slower or faster? And you have a little dinosaur in your bag as well, so you can throw that dinosaur in the oobleck and save it and you can save it and see what might work best.
Oh, I have a dinosaur?
You do have a dinosaur.
Okay.
We're going to drop this sweet child into the cornstarch.
Oh,
You
man.
can see it sinking. And so, Tammy, are you going to try to save him by yanking him out very quickly, or are you going to yank the dinosaur out slowly to try to save it? What do you think?
I think I'm going to try doing it like quick at first.
Yeah, you want to save it, get it out of there quickly, right?
Oh.
Then you have to put your fingers in there slowly to get them, right?
Oh.
So what about as you pull them out, try to yank them and see what happens.
Oh, it's like stuck. My hand gets stuck, but when I go really slow, I can get in.
Hello, dinosaur. You're welcome. It'll be $50 for a quicksand rescue fee. Okay.
Ew.
They definitely could use a shower, that dinosaur, I think, but at least the dinosaur can breathe. What we learned was that you have to pull the dinosaur out slowly, or Ella, to help them escape. So you saved the day. We're really proud of you. I knew you could do it. So did Tabby. But as Tabby continues to play with the dinosaur and the oobleck, I'm going to help on that after her because it is really fun. Let's just think about what could we use oobleck for. So as opposed to just being a stress relief, sort of a stress ball, fun to play with, are there any purposes in the world you could think of that would actually be useful for oobleck or something like it? Do you have any ideas there?
No.
No? It's okay. It'll be fun just to play with it no matter what. But I had to look this up actually too. I wasn't really sure. And some ideas that came up that I saw online were you can use it for packing material. So for instance, those like little air-filled bags. Instead of that, maybe you could use something like oobleck. And if it ever drops, falls off the delivery truck, then it would sort of nestle it and become more solid-like. The one that I thought was really, really cool was filling potholes in the road. So especially in developing countries, it takes a long time to fix a pothole. I mean, it does even in New Haven, but especially in countries where it might be harder to do. What you can do is put oobleck or something like it into the road in that pothole. And so when a car drives over it, it becomes more solid-like because there's a lot of force applied to it. So it's like a solid pothole fix, but only whenever it's needed, because otherwise you just have liquid and it's just chilling there. The last thing we want to remind you is please put this in the trash. If you want to keep the container, that's fine. Just leave it out on your counter for a little while and let the cornstarch dry out. And then you can just sort of, scoop it into the trash. If you are impatient like I am, you can just try to scrape it with your hands slowly into the trash, and you can save that container. But if you want to avoid any issues whatsoever, maybe just throw the whole thing out so your parents don't get mad at you. Probably the best idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us to learn about OOBLECK. We had a lot of fun. I know Tabby did.
I'm still having fun.
And I always love OOBLECK. It's a lot of fun. So take care. We'll see you next time. All right, we're back. We just wanted to tell you something very quickly. Tabby thought it would be a good idea for us to explain the best ways to wash our hands.
Yeah, so my hands had so much cornstarch on it, and I was like, since I can't put it down the sink, is it okay for me to wash my hands? And so Rick said that what we can do is wet a piece of paper towel and then wipe your hand off first, or use a baby wipe and throw that in the garbage first, and then go to the sink with soap and wash your hand that way. And then your hands will be all squeaky clean.
Your hands, but probably not the floor where you did it. So you probably still have to vacuum and sweep because our floor is kind of nasty right now from all the cornstarch. All right. Thanks a lot, Tabby, for that tip.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Bye.